In this week's In-Ear Insights, we are back from MAICON, the Marketing AI Conference, the conference that we've been a part of since its very first event. In fact, Katie, you and I spoke at the 2019, the inaugural event. And this year, it was bigger and better than ever, with more than double the number of participants from the inaugural year, almost more than triple the number of people from last year. And from what Paul Retzer, the founder, was saying, they've had so much interest in everything they have to offer that they are bursting at the seams because of generative AI. Every talk was generative AI. In fact, traditional machine learning stuff barely even mentioned. It was all generative AI all the time, mostly large language models. I did the opening keynote, which seemed to be well received and things, but in terms of the themes and sort of the big picture for where marketers think generative AI is, pretty much, I would say most of the crowd was still in the what is this stuff phase, or how do I use this productively, or is this going to be this, the singularity and Skynet? Sort of those the main themes.
Well, I just first I want to say, how proud I am of Paul and Kathy and Mike and the rest of the team, because they have been beating this drum for years, trying to get people to pay attention. Even, I wouldn't say even more so than you, Chris, but just in a different, they're putting a whole event together. They're building their whole company around marketing AI. It's literally called the Marketing AI Institute. And so to see them have their moment in the sun was just so great, because they've never wavered from their message, and the industry finally caught up enough for people to be like, oh, well, this is where I need to be. So I am just so proud of them and so happy for them that this is how it turned out. Like, they stayed the course, and I think there's, without getting too deep, like, there's definitely a lesson there of like, stay true to what and stay true to your message, and people will catch up eventually. And for them, they finally did. So I'm just so happy for them that this is how it worked out. And so, so you did the opening keynote on large learning models. And so for those who weren't there at MAICON, that means, so it wasn't a breakout session. Everybody at the event was in one of the main ballrooms, and Chris took the stage and scared the bejesus out of everybody. But I will say, as you were talking, Chris, on stage, I was back here in Massachusetts getting text messages from a variety of people about how much you were killing it. So do you want to talk a little bit about what the main purpose of that talk was? Like, what were you educating people on? Because the large learning models wasn't just about generative AI.
Well, so I talked about generative AI. Most of the focus was on large language models, everything from GPT-4 to Claude 2 to, take your pick of all these different things. So it was an introduction. What is this stuff? How do companies make these things? And then we spent a lot of time on use cases, like practical, hey, go, take this slide and go try this in the system of your choice, whether it's ChatGPT or Claude or whoever. Go try the things so you can see it for yourself. And then we talked a bit about the risks, and then spent some time on where this stuff is going from our perspective. And one of the biggest things that I've really been hammering on for the last 2 or 3 months is how open source adds a big wrench in the works in terms of the spread of this technology. The reason for that is, when it was just OpenAI and maybe Google and Microsoft, right? There's some big names, big vendors, cool, everybody understands that. And then Meta comes along and says, hey, here's this wonderful model that works really well. Everybody can have it. It's a model for you and a model for you. They did the Oprah thing. And this had a couple of major impacts. One, it just took a baseball bat to the knees of regulation, because you can't regulate it anymore. You can't say OpenAI, Microsoft, and Google, these are the rules. This is what's going to happen. Facebook's like, everybody can have it now. Good luck. Which I thought was so clever, because it basically just shot down regulation before it could begin, while Congress is discussing, like, hey, what do we do about this stuff? How do we regulate OpenAI? Facebook's like, well, now good luck regulating this, suckers.
Facebook. Um, okay, so it's a hot mess. We know this. What were some of the other sessions or talks that stood out to you? Because one of the things that I know events are struggling with is they want to get AI experts, but for a lot of people, AI is still so new that it's really hard to find true experts who've been doing this for a while. Because you can stick anyone up on stage and say this is how you build a prompt, whether it's good or not. The audience may not know. So what were some of the other sessions from true AI experts that stuck out to you that were really valuable that people should be following and paying attention to?
So one is actually, it was AI, but not in terms of AI expertise, but in terms of legal expertise. Our friend in law firm, Shannon Torek, Torek Law, took the stage on Thursday to talk about AI regulation, copyright, and all that stuff. And her session was really informative because one of the things I didn't realize was you can have copyrights and trademarks and stuff like that, and service marks and things, and that protects your intellectual property. But trade secrets don't have the same kind of protection because they are inherently secret. If they're disclosed, they're no longer secret, and you no longer have claim to them. But you can't lay claim to them without converting them into like a patent or a trademark or a copyright. And so she was saying, if you put trade secret information into a prompt that then goes into a large language model like GPT-4, you have forfeited your right to call that a trade secret because you've handed it over to a third party. I'm like, oh shit, right? If I think about all the people who are handling data and going, let's put it into Chat GPT, like that's super dangerous.
What if you build your own private large learning model? Like, I guess so. And that's sort of the question. And I know that you've talked about this a lot. Is there's the public large learning model, which everybody is using and asking really bizarre questions, which is probably why it's getting dumber. Or there's building your own. So if you build your own and host your own, I would assume that it's then okay to share trade secrets and even, protected personally identifiable information if it's your own personal large learning model. Is that a correct assumption?
That's correct. So if you were to use a tool, for example, like Cobalt or Llama CPP, or probably the one that's would be easiest for people to use would be this one that's called LM Studio. You download the model of your choice, right? And I have like 14 different models. I have Karen, the editor, for example, there. And you run this locally. This runs on your laptop. You need like a decent gaming laptop for it, but this runs on your laptop. You can unplug all your internet cables, turn off your Wi-Fi, and this will work fine because it's not sending data out anywhere. It's not recording any data, and therefore you are protecting your secrets, your confidential information, and stuff like that. So that would be an example to your point of, yeah, you could do that with those things. One other thing I didn't know from her session is the IP address has migrated from PII to sensitive protected information. And in a healthcare context, Amanda Todorovich from Cleveland Clinic said this: your IP address is in a healthcare context is considered protected health information. I'm like, oh, because Google Analytics logs that. She's like, yeah, we can't use Google Analytics. We are forbidden to use Google Analytics because it logs IPs, and that is protected health information now. I'm like, okay,
that's a big deal. There's a lot to unpack there, and I'm gonna write that down for a different episode because there's a lot to unpack there.
But the short of that is, if you were putting like server logs to do some anomaly detection, and you were using a third-party tool like ChatGPT, you can't do that anymore. You are violating HIPAA.
Ooh.
If you use it.
Yeah, that's a BFD.
Exactly.
To put it mildly. What were some of, did you without, throwing anyone under the bus, but did you come across any sessions where the information was just flat out wrong that was being shared?
Not wrong in the sense of like technically wrong. There were some sessions which I thought had a maybe a bias towards a certain point of view that I don't necessarily personally agree with. It doesn't make it wrong, but
Mhm.
it's not how I would approach, say, a given issue. And then there were some sessions that were just mind blowing. So Professor Ethan Mollick's closing day one keynote, he talked about where AI is going, and he's a really really well educated, thought out person in the space. And he was like, yeah, that what is happening right now in AI is sort of the height of irresponsibility in terms of the large scale implications for these different tools and technologies, to the point where what big tech companies are doing is hazardous, is his point
Mhm.
of view. You're handing tools out to people that are like handing chainsaws to toddlers, and then you're wondering why people are getting hurt, because
Mm.
no one is, by handing out access to models that are essentially raw materials, you're pushing the onus of responsibility for their intelligent use to people who don't know how to use them. So again, it's like handing chainsaws to people who've never had a chainsaw, and then just hoping they figure it out, and not providing more than the minimal amount of guidance. But he said a couple of other things that were really interesting, one of which I wanted to tell you about. But he did say, in terms of tools, what tools to use, stick to the foundation models, which is something we say all the time. Like, yeah, there's
Mhm.
a gazillion and a half vendors, but you should learn how ChatGPT itself works. You should use it.
Mhm.
Um, he said, if you want to survive as a practitioner in your field, it's one of his 4 rules: use AI for everything. He said, use AI for things that even you don't even think you should use AI for. He said, use it for everything so that you understand implicitly what it is and is not good at, and how fast it's evolving. Because you went to go use a large language model for something last week and it couldn't do it, and this week it can. He's like, that's the
Mhm.
only way you'll know how things are evolving, is by using these. But the other thing he said was that development, software development, is the most impacted area by AI, above and beyond anything else. He said 70% of ChatGPT usage is software development now.
Mhm.
And he said, and this is the part I want to get your take on, agile development is no longer necessary because you no longer need code review cycles. You can just hand off to the machine to do your QA.
I get it from a efficiency standpoint, but you're sort of back in that developers reviewing their own code challenge. And so I do disagree with that. I think at some point that will be a viable thing, but from my viewpoint, and of course I haven't dug into any of this yet, I'm just hearing it for the first time, but my off the cuff reaction is you have to have two different systems stood up. So like you can't have Chat GPT reviewing Chat GPT. You would want to have some other large learning model reviewing and sort of a gut check and a counterbalance against what one sort of this. It's the reason why QA engineers exist in the first place. Um, so you would want to have, the code check system separate out, standing separately from whatever it is you're doing in order for that to be a true statement. So I do see a risk, at least where, AI is in its infancy in terms of accuracy and reliability. It's not accurate 100% of the time. And that to me is problematic to make the statement that you won't need QA engineers. I do feel that you will still need that human intervention because the machine knows what humans know. And if the software developer is making errors, then it's introducing those errors into the machine. And that's then what the machine knows. And that to me is where you still need someone separate and independent from that. And so, it's going to learn over time. It's going to get smarter. It's going to be less error prone, but it's still never going to be a perfect system.
Do you agree with his argument that agile itself is unnecessary because you don't need the 2 week scrums anymore? You and Chat GPT, or you and Anthropic's Claude, can iterate so much faster now, that that cycle of stand up scrum,
Mm-hmm.
2 weeks, you can shorten that down to multiple cycles within a day.
I think it's true in terms of the actual development work. getting done. I think that you probably don't need, the agile 2 week iterative cycles from the actual work getting done standpoint, but from a planning standpoint, I still think that, some kind of planning, whether it's 2 weeks or 2 days or 2 hours, there still needs to be some kind of, hey, what did we do? What is the outcome? What are we expecting this thing? Because the challenge is that he's talking about black boxing everything down into, okay, one person sitting in front of a computer just doing things, and then the rest of the product team or the company going, well, what happened? Well, it's fine. The large learning model handled it. Right. But what happened? What changed? What did we do? What are we telling our customers? What are the release notes? Where do we have to look for possible bugs down the line? Because there's a ripple effect of these things. So agile or any kind of planning, you don't even have to call it out, just be smart about it. You still want to do requirements, you still want to have outcomes, you still want to have measurement, like those things you won't want to skip over, and those are those foundational pieces. Maybe the machines move faster than humans. Great. The machines aren't, unless you're programming them this way, the machines aren't telling you, here's what the customer asked for and here's when we can deliver it.
Mm-hmm.
So you still need that. You still need all of the pieces around the actual development work happening.
Yep. And then the day 2 opening keynote was actually the one that I wanted to see, and I was fortunately able to see, the vast majority of Cassie Kozyrkov, the chief decision scientist at Google, was talking about what jobs AI will take. And conceptually, pretty much everyone agrees on the same foundational concept that AI can't take a job, but it absolutely can take individual tasks because you automate away tasks. She said something very interesting that I think you might have a perspective on as well. Because me and my tendency to not document things. She said the way AI works is it learns by example, right? We call it data, but it learns by example. And she said, if you find a task that it's easier for you to just do the task than to explain it or document it, that task should go to AI, because the instructions are too complex for you to articulate, but the machine can learn from your examples. And then if in terms of identifying tasks for machines to take over, her perspective was things that you just don't want to explain, that's something a machine should do.
So the challenge there is that that's literally everything for you. And so I can see where I can totally understand her perspective, because the machine is essentially, it has to, just in very basic terms, it has to do the documentation for it to be able to do it in a repeated way. So, we're not seeing the documentation happening, but the machine has to catalog step by step so when you say, hey, machine, do this thing, the machine's like, let me go back into my library of things, find that process, and then execute it. And so I can totally see that perspective. What I would want to see is then, can you retrieve that process from the machine in order to create training materials for humans or other machines?
Right.
And then how do you validate that the steps were correct? So, again, sort of going into that black box of software development, sure, you can train the machine to do the thing, but how do you know that the thing is correct?
Mm-hmm. The other thing I thought was interesting is that she said, in terms of what tasks machines will take over versus what tasks human will still remain uniquely human, she said, humans inherently are creative. We are creators. We are thinkers. And that's the part that we enjoy and we're good at. Whereas the doing part, the execution part, that is typically something machines are better at. And so she said, AI won't take jobs. It will just take away all of the tasks that are execution based, that you were of doing the thing. And I sat there and thought to myself, if you were trying to put lipstick on the pig of who's going to lose their jobs, that's not a very thick coat of lipstick, because essentially you just said that 80% of your job is doing stuff, right? Which means that if that's the part that the machine's going to do, the 80% of the tasks in every job are going to be handed off to a machine. what are you going to do with all the extra people? Because that's that's tremendous amount of labor that's being will be offloaded to machinery. And I agree, but it was contradictory kind of to me. It was contradictory to the message, AI is not going to take your job. Well, yeah, it is. It's going to take 80% of your job, and not, how do I say this nicely? Not every job requires a lot of thinking and innovation, right?
Mhm.
The person who cleans my hotel room does not have to innovate. In fact, they're explicitly told not to innovate. Like, just do the thing. The sheets go this way. The furniture should not be glued to the ceiling. Things like that. If the person who hands me the stuff at McDonald's after I order it, again, innovation is not really a feature of that system. In fact, innovation is strongly discouraged. Follow the procedures. And
Mhm.
we've seen, if you go to McDonald's now, a good portion of each individual task is now automated. Like when you watch them put fries in, there's a machine that measures out the number of fries, there's a machine that measures how long it's in, in the fryer and stuff like that. So the human is basically just moving a basket around, and that's about it for that job. It's not what it used to be. So I feel like she's 100% correct, but that the message was disguised to be something that was more reassuring than it should have been.
I think that, that future state is a few years off. But you're right. I think that those repetitive tasks, it's interesting. Every once in a while, like you and I will talk about this, like, oh, I just need some kind of mindless task to just like, it's like you appreciate the monotony of just doing something mindless sometimes. And you're absolutely right. Those are the tasks that will no longer exist. I think for some companies, the team members won't be given a choice. The company will say, this is what we're going to do. All of these mindless, repetitive tasks are now going to be done by machines. I think there will be some holdout companies, probably smaller companies, that won't have artificial intelligence doing those things. So, I sort of think, and I hate the term artisanal, but I sort of see the industry will split, and you'll have the AI, and then you'll have the artisanal companies where things are done by hand. I mean, if you look at, you know, uh,
So,
Amazon versus Etsy, for example,
mhm.
you have Amazon, who's basically the big box store who has run a lot of people out of jobs. And then you have Etsy, which is the collection of small businesses for the most part, where things are handmade and, people are looking for more of that human experience. I think that companies, like even big marketing companies, B2B companies, they're going to, there's going to be a divide. You're going to have the companies that are going to, use AI to automate everything. And then you're going to have the companies that are like, cool, AI is great, but if you still want that human handmade thing, then we can still do that. So I think that there's going to be that battle, and people are going to start to choose sides of, do I want automation or do I want artisanal?
I think you're right, because there is that sense. There is a sense among some folks that, because a lot of the machinery is black box, you
Mm-hmm.
don't necessarily know that you can trust it all that much. Whereas you even though technically your brain is also a black box, having another human being working on something, yeah, there's still going to be mistakes in it, but at least you know who to ask about the
Mm-hmm.
mistake. There's someone that you can hold accountable. Whereas, a neural network with 80 layers and 4 dropouts and a softmax layer at the end, there's no one you can go to and say, hey, this thing didn't do what it was supposed to do. Why didn't it? And so I agree with that. The other thing that Professor Malik talked about, which dovetails into this, is that we are at a turning point right now in AI where we have to decide, as these generative systems begin to consume everything, what does the future look like for work?
Mm-hmm.
Do we turn over our tasks, as we should, right, to the machines where it's appropriate, and enjoy the fruits of that labor of, more free time, more time to think, more time to spend with your family, more time to take up golfing, whatever?
Mm-hmm.
Or does it become a hyper-capitalist hellscape where you have 1/10 the employees, but you have 15x the profitability, and you just continue to work everyone to death? And he said those seem to be the two forks in the road, the two branches in the forks in the road. And he said it's not clear which way society will go. And I'm sitting here in the audience trying not to yell. Of course it's clear. This is America. It's a hyper-capitalist hellscape. You know which road we're going to take.
But I think that's where you go back to, companies making those choices of, fully automated versus, things done by hand by humans. It and I feel like this is a deeper conversation for another episode. But I do feel like, the way in which we think about, hourly work and how we bring home salaries and what the value, of the things that we do are, that needs a lot of examination. There's, we sort of poke fun at the thought leaders, people who are just, want to get paid to think and not do anything. But hey, guess what we just talked about for 30 minutes? And so, we need to rethink what that business model looks like. And so there's a lot of work to do. There's a lot of work to do. And I think that we as humans are not keeping up with how fast AI is changing things. And that's where that fork in the road is. We may find ourselves going down the path of hyper-capitalism for now because we just can't keep up. But I do feel like that doesn't mean that is going to be the only road forever. I feel like there's going to be, side roads and branches off that road of people starting to figure out, okay, this is what a new business model could look like. Let me, spin off from this hyper capitalism road and go back the other way. But it's just going to take time, and people have to be able to make those adjustments to their businesses.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting how this all plays out. But so those are some of the big highlights from the event. I found it incredibly refreshing. It was a wonderful event. Again, kudos to Paul and Ashley and Kathy and everyone on the team for putting on a fantastic event. Hopefully we'll be back again next year. Of course, we don't want to make presumptions, but I would encourage anyone who's thinking about wanting to learn more about marketing AI. If you're not already, hanging out with us, that would be a great event to go to. And if you are hanging out with us, then come find us at that event, and we can all hang out together and speculate as to what the different speakers are saying. I'll leave with one last funny quote from the closing day 2 keynote from Olivia Gamblin, who's an ethicist who did a whole session on AI ethics. She threw out this little gem, says, "Compliance basically means you're one step above illegal." I'm like, that is a great quote.
Oh, I can see I'm going to hear this one a lot.
We actually got it. We were hanging out at the bar afterwards, and she and I got into a very long philosophical discussion about the nature of fairness and what constitutes fairness from an ethics perspective. But that is a whole other bag of worms that maybe sometime we'll tackle, or maybe, who knows, maybe we'll even have her on the show or something.
That sounds good. Well, Chris, I'm glad that you had such educational and wonderful time at MAICON. I know you also did a deck. Are your slides available for people who may have missed your talk?
Funny that not only are the slides available, but within an hour and a half of getting off stage, the entire talk was available because I am a nerd. And you can go get that at wherecanIgettheslides.com.
It's so easy to remember.
It really is. Everyone had a good laugh at that. And if you're not sure about that, or you just want to chat about it, you can also get it as well as a bunch of other things in our free Slack group. Go to trustinsights.ai/analytics for marketers, where you and over 3,200 other marketers are asking and answering each other's questions about data, analytics, and AI every single day. And wherever it is you watch or listen to the show, if there's a channel you'd rather have it on, go to trustinsights.ai/TI podcast. Chances are we have it on the platform of your choice. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next time.